We lost everything. Started from zero. We didn't have a single asset to our name. We have no career. We're at dead zero right now. We're starting fresh. And you need to make your first $1 million.
My focus would be on mentorship. Try to bring them an opportunity that also create an opportunity for myself. You want to have people around you that are challenging you and building each other up together, kind of at the same state as you might be in. You also need people who are maybe 5 years ahead of you. But for something like this, you should kind of have like your stretch mentor. But you need to find someone that whatever your aspiration is, a mentor should be 10 times that.
When I was broke, I had rich habits. When I was broke, I had rich
All right, welcome to another episode of the Master Keys podcast. I'm Chandler Haliburton.
I'm Neal and Andreino.
And we are Atlantic Canada's #1 real estate investing podcast. Undefeated, unchallenged also.
Yes.
Dominating, either way.
But what's this podcast about?
I mean, it's all about investing in real estate and growing your wealth. We come from the perspective, as you know, we're real estate agents, we're investors ourselves. The team, I think, is around $500 million now that we've sold throughout our careers. And between the two of us, we own a couple hundred real estate or rental properties, I should say. So we talk about the news, we talk about investing, we talk about what we've learned, mistakes we've made. We learn from you guys. As always, post your comments down below. And we're just trying to build this community, so it's growing every episode. We appreciate you so much. A little reminder, if you're watching this right now, maybe throw it up on your social medias that you're watching or you're listening to this, because it makes a huge difference, and tag us in it, please, so we can shout you out on our end of things.
Yeah. Thanks for listening, guys. We always appreciate it. So before, to hop into it, we don't have this written down. We're hopping in. One crazy story that happened this week.
You're asking me one?
Yeah.
Ooh, one crazy story that happened this week.
But what happened this week?
Like as a landlord?
As a landlord,
Are you
as an agent.
Of something?
No, I'm actually. I just said this, and now I'm like,
Oh man, crazy thing happened this week. Ooh,
any fights?
No fights, no issues with tenants. It's just been like the slow drip of stuff. You know, have to caulk a tub here, a door came off the hinges there, leaky washing machine.
Is this in your personal
hose.
house or is this in the apartments?
These are all the rentals, right? Like it all comes up one thing after another after another. Dealing with some turnover. Have one building 10 of 12 units empty, as you know, so that's good. Starting demo on that. So nothing crazy, I suppose. I am close to getting my next construction draw, or should I say first construction draw, because one thing we've talked about on here is that I've always stubbornly just used my own money and refinanced at the end. And now I'm doing this project where I'm actually going to have 3 construction phases for that 8 unit to get it completed, and I should have that financed next week, which will be nice. I'll pay myself back the work
as you're finishing the work.
Yeah, basically. So it'll be nice to have that. But no, what about you?
Now that I said it, I'm like, oh shit, I need to have a story. Nothing really too crazy. I got in some fights, not actual physical fights, but I feel like verbal altercations are pretty standard.
Oh, with the agents or with clients?
All of the above.
Yeah. Agents, tenants,
trying to
clients.
think which ones I can say, which ones I can't say. This was an interesting one that happened, and I'm not ragging on anyone in specific, but I went to go meet with a client, a friend, and he owns a building. So I just drove up to the building. There's parking out back. I went and parked.
Yep.
And like as I'm walking up to the building, I'm on the phone, and someone just starts screaming at me. And I'm like, what's going on? They're like, excuse me.
Okay.
And I'm like, no, not by name. And I'm like, what's up? And they're like, you can't park there. And I'm like, what do you mean? Like, it doesn't say anything that I can't park there. And he's like, you're not allowed to park there. And I'm like, is it your parking spot? No, it's not. It's my building. And I'm like, that's really odd because I'm meeting with the building owner right now. And it's,
ooh, I love that.
Then he went full insane. He's like, you can't park there. And I'm like, but it's not your building or your parking spot. And he was just like policing this for no reason. I'm like, what is the objective here? And he went nuts. And I was like, nah, sorry, sir. If it was your parking spot, I can move. If it's your building and you're asking me to move, I can move. But since it's neither of those things, I cannot move.
Yeah, I've had that too. And people are like, oh, it's actually no parking there. I'm like, I know. I'm just going to take my chances though. And I just walk away. It's like, let's just see how this plays out. You're not going to do anything about it, but
anyways, it's not crazy, but I don't know what the motivation is a lot of the time when people
people are weird, man.
Yeah, and why they would get so mad. I'm like, why is this the thing that you're taking on today to just come out and start screaming at me?
Also, on
and
the flip
lying,
side,
like
though,
just blatantly lying in multiple different ways.
Yeah, if it was my building and someone was incorrectly parked and another tenant stepped up and told them to not park there, I'd be like, appreciate that, man.
Totally, 100%. But it's neither his building nor he wasn't even a tenant of the building. He lived in the building next door.
Oh man, so he really didn't have a dog in that fight, but
yeah. anyways, I just thought of that because I asked you the question, and then I was like, shit, I got to respond to this too.
Yeah, no news is good news, right? Like nothing too crazy. We're here. This is crazy. By the time this airs, it's going to be what, a month and a half until Christmas? Not even.
Yeah,
Like, we're coming to the end of the year, so
freaking out.
ask yourself, have you had a successful year? It's that time. The reckoning, the annual reckoning is upon us. I always take stock this time of year of like, okay, how was the year? We're going to talk a lot about that when we get into our end of year wrap up and our New Year's Eve special. But for today, what we're going to talk about, our main topic in the second half kind of this episode, is this thing that you've seen going around on social media.
What's
about
that?
like, if you lost everything.
Yes, we saw a trend that's going around on social media, which is if you lost everything today, how would you start again to make your first $1 million? So Chandler and I thought about it and came up with some ideas ourselves. We actually have differing opinions on this, so
okay,
be interested to see
know what yours is, but
see what you say. And then also we have some interesting news regarding obviously house prices. Everybody wants to know what's going on there, kind of across the globe. Some news on more tenant and landlord disputes.
oh yeah,
There's some interesting stuff going on in the VR world because I feel like it's getting more and more relevant and more involved in today's
and more appealing.
And then also some stuff on the metaverse.
There's no inflation in the metaverse.
We haven't touched on the metaverse recently, so I'm taking it down the tech path today.
All right, and I'm going to start here. Well, actually, let's start right here near home. So I'm going to fire some stats out.
Okay.
The numbers were released for last month here in Nova Scotia and Halifax. That's where we're based, for anyone curious. So prices have gone back up across Nova Scotia. This is actually a nice change where pricing is up for the month. There had been this kind of slow drip of prices downward. They're up almost 2% to 386,000 for the province. A lot of people in other provinces are going to hear that average number and be like, oh my God, Nova Scotia is cheap. And we are relatively affordable compared to the rest of the country, but realize that runs a pretty wide spectrum from, what houses would cost here in Halifax versus what they may cost in Cape Breton or
very small communities.
Areas. Yeah, so up to an average price of 386 from 379 in September. But overall, Nova Scotia is down 16% from the peak of April, which was at 462,000. So even at the height of the craziness, most of that, again, driven by Halifax, the province
Wow, we're down from 462 to 389?
386.
386, sorry?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, pretty significant.
20%.
Yeah, but year over year, the province is still up 5.7%, and Halifax is still up almost 8% year over year. So even when there was that big gain and a lot of give back since, we've sort of talked about this before, that home prices are still, 8% more expensive here in Halifax than they were 12 months ago. So still a lot of equity, a lot of strength there, especially for people who maybe were fortunate enough to purchase before the biggest of the run-ups.
I'm going to respond to this with one of the news pieces that I brought for today. And this is that more on a Canada scale. Canada had the largest price drop across, again, the whole country in Q2 of all the G7 countries, right? So this is
really?
like, yeah, Japan, France, Germany, USA, Canada, these countries. Canada faced the largest price drop in Q2, which was an average of 4.3%.
Wow.
Followed by Japan at 2.7%, and then France and Germany at 0.7 and 0.6%. The crazier part for me was the States in Q2 averaged to be up by 4.7%. So as Canada was down and the States were up 4.7%, the only other country was Germany, up 0.2%, which realistically is flat.
Yeah.
The other thing to consider, and what everyone's saying this is pointing to, is that Canada's actually the one in the housing bubble. When you look at the charts of the G7, almost all of them followed the same line of price appreciation. Canada actually went up a fair bit more, to the tune of actually 42% over the course of the pandemic, with the next person in line being the States at 24%.
Counterpoint to that, though, compared to those other countries, we have two major cities by those country standards.
100%.
Right? We have two major cities.
100%.
Those countries will have, dozens of major cities. So you end up...
They all have way higher populations.
yeah, exactly. So I think we are more prone to the extremes. Like our outliers are literally two cities and then the rest of the country. I think if you took Vancouver and Toronto out of that, I think we'd be much more in line with those others. But it is interesting to hear that about the States, because I had another number where the entire housing population, homeowners in the U.S., lost a total of $1.3 trillion dollars worth of net worth, of equity worth,
Yeah.
in last quarter alone. Which honestly, I was like, doesn't sound that bad. It worked out to be about 30,000.
This has 30K a person.
Yeah, about 30,000 per homeowner, which is not insignificant. But again, it's interesting to hear your stats that the overall pricing is up, because that means some people in certain markets are benefiting, and then some are getting absolutely hammered. So it's hard when you try to take a wide population and then come up with these averages. But
100%. I think Canada is definitely the smallest in the G7. It's just like, I'll show you this chart. Like it's pretty dramatic. But I'm with you that Toronto and Vancouver are like driving.
Look at us go.
Yeah, are driving factors for this price growth. But it was still just insane to see. It was also, I found really interesting, because I've had more concern about the States being beat down, and oddly enough, the States have kind of continued to move along. But that's Q2. I think right now things have changed down there, and there's definitely some concerns.
Yeah, and their inflation numbers actually come out tomorrow, which will be last week by the time this airs. And there's some concern about where those inflation numbers are. They are ahead of us in a bad way, I guess, in terms of inflation. I think it's running around like 8.5 still for them there, and there's optimism that it'll be lower here with this announcement, but we'll see. And then hot on the heels of that will probably be another 75-point interest rate hike. But anyway, that's just some stats of what's going on there. I've got some stuff specific to Toronto that I found pretty.
Messed me up. I love some good Toronto
We
stuff.
love some Toronto stuff. So Herb Nation, I want to
Herb Nation, y'all. What's up?
which of course I do subscribe to.
I was gonna say, you follow that pretty closely, right?
They released a study, or they had a report, or whatever you want to call it, that in order to afford the average price $730,000 condo in Toronto, you need to be making $135,000 a year. Which,
That's it?
yeah, that seemed like they were undershooting it.
Okay, I'm about to go on a little tangent on the side. I've been getting into this battle with a bunch of other people, but there are more preferable and favorable banking options in Ontario. They
That
have
is
different
true.
banking rules, and they test at different rates, and they also offer cheaper rates because they have more volume, and it's considered a stronger market. I was having this conversation with somebody that works here as a developer here in Halifax, and like, that's not the case. And I'm like, man, when I call all of them to give me rate quotes, they are better than what I'm getting quoted here. The other thing is, I've talked to bankers here. They said in Atlantic Canada, because there's less competition, they charge a larger spread.
Yeah, I wouldn't.
They're
doubt
doing
that
less
at all.
volume, and they
Yeah.
just charge a larger spread. So they're more profitable here on a percentage basis, but actually as a dollar amount, they're obviously infinitely more profitable in Ontario because they're lending out so much more money,
Yeah.
but they make more per dollar.
There's also be way more
In Atlantic
alternative
Canada.
lenders, or whatever you want to call it, private
Yep,
lenders,
private
but
institutions.
small scale banking institutions of some sort.
Yeah, anyways, I cut you off. Continue, sorry.
No, it's a good point. I thought that was ridiculous. I don't know any world in which you could afford that condo right now. But there was also this caveat in there. It's saying, and or have really rich parents. As part of that, because a lot of the people even being able to afford that also somehow miraculously have these gigantic down
Yeah,
payments.
200 grand down.
So I thought that was kind of a funny number, because it didn't seem feasible whatsoever. But then there's this thing like, oh, and of course your parents are going to help you, which is just this implied reality for a lot of people who buy in Toronto and Vancouver, which is why, and we talked about this in the previous episode, so many of them are saying, I can't do it. I'm leaving.
100%.
Right?
It's weird because one rule of thumb that I used to use when rates were 3% range was $20,000 of income gets you about $100,000 worth of money.
Right.
Now that rates are up so much, it's more like probably $30,000 of income gets you $100,000 of money.
Yeah.
So based on that, I would expect these people to come in at $450K for their pre-approval.
Yeah.
Whereas before, I would have expected them to come in at $700 for their pre-approval.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, I'm very surprised that they're saying, especially because there's condo fees too. Like if someone came to me 2 years ago and said, I make 150 grand a year and I want to buy a condo, I'd say, let's look at something for 600.
Yeah.
I don't know how now with these rates up, they're being like, yeah, you make 135K, you want $1 million house? We got you.
Yeah. I mean, I guess either way, the conversation then goes to, one, why is that the price point? Two, how crazy is it that even making that sort of money, you can't afford a condo there, and how much worse it's going to get, and all these other things. But the rents also in Toronto are up $500 year over year. We talked a little bit about rents in the last episodes. Major centers still doing very, very well. You had some theories about surrounding areas a little bit, maybe coming back down, stuff like that. But at least year over year, rental rates in Toronto are up $500, which is not going to come as a surprise to anyone. But another thing that's been circulating a lot, and I wish somewhere we can dig up the old episode where we talked about pre-construction. And we talked about this a couple times since, but you remember, you weren't there, and I came in right after, we recorded an episode right after this group came from Toronto trying to sell pre-con to the agents in the office.
Yes.
Have you ever looked at that?
I have, and I was actually going to bring it up on our last episode, but we ran out of time. I've looked at the pre-con because, like, again, Ontario, like, they do so much now to sell because it's such a competitive market. They'll be like, brand new development district, going to be done in 2 years. We guarantee you give us 10% now, 10% in 6 months, 10%, like, and you do it all the way up. Or I think it's 5% because you ultimately put in 25% or 20% prior to closing. And then we offer you 5 years guaranteed rate of return with rentals and stabilization and all this. So they make it sound so good. They're like, they have it all calculated out, and they're like, you're going to make an average of 8.7% on your money. You're going to end up with a condo. If you assume no appreciation, any appreciation you make is going to be a bonus. And all you got to do today is put down 2%. And so I've looked at them many, many times. I've looked at them in BC as well because the projections, I was looking at towns outside of Vancouver along the northern coast, and the projections were insane. They were like wood frame condos in these little like ski surf towns. And they were like, you'll make 13% a year for the next 3 years. It includes property management. It includes
those are
all
sort of like these weird timeshare almost setups.
But
I know.
It's
but
a condo.
Like, yeah.
It's not even, like, you own the condo, but they're including with your condo purchase, they include property management for 3 years and a guaranteed rental rate.
Yeah.
They say, we guarantee you $2,100 a month for the 3 years after this.
Yeah.
And like, part of me, I was like, I was, this is too good. I remember talking to a couple of guys in the office, and I'm like, well, maybe I'll lob down like the 20K on one of these now, and then every 6 months I just got to put down another 20 grand over the next 3 years. I get my down payment together of $150,000, and I end up with the property. And there's all this potential that when I close and I paid 600 contract price, potentially by close it's worth 800.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't,
Then
I
they'll
just
rent it.
I'll
Yeah.
rent it out.
Yeah. The former option, though, which is the sell it before it even closes, is the big pitch, right? Where it's like, listen, you might tie up 60, 80, maybe $100,000 over the course of this development in installment payments towards buying this hypothetical unit. And it may take 4 years for that unit to be complete, but you are going to be in it for a relatively small amount. And in the 4 years, you could sell it at some point to an actual buyer for a significantly inflated price. And that was the big pitch that these companies were making. The challenge is, I've got the numbers here. There are 31,000 pre-construction units set to be complete in 2023 in Toronto.
That's insane.
19,000 of them are set to be complete in the first 6 months. How's that going to go when these people, one, did they buy early enough, and is there enough of a spread for them to sell and make a profit?
Yep.
And then it's like, okay, if there is just sheer buyer demand, is there enough for all of the people to sell? Because at some point it becomes a race to the bottom, or increasingly people need to keep them. And then there's a challenge of, well, what about the people who you never really had the pressure to actually close? As long as you were okay with your down payment, you didn't need proof of financing. It was 4 years away in some cases.
Yeah.
So what if it comes due here and you don't actually qualify for that mortgage?
Or you
because
have
the rates
20
are
of them
through the roof?
that you bought.
Yeah, or you did this on a number of them. It's going to be a little bit dicey here.
I'm in total agreement, and this is why I wanted to bring it up on the last episode. Again, we ran out of time, but the one thing that they do to mitigate this, because I think they've been through these issues before, and this is where I'm like, oh, it's kind of smart.
Not to this degree, though, but
Not maybe to this degree, but they do these staged down payments. And this way, the down payment actually accumulates to be 20 or 25%.
Right.
So technically, they should be able to qualify you for some sort of mortgage to close. And you'll see with a lot of them is builders will do mortgages to close. So the builder who built
Right.
the condo will be like, I'll give you the 75%. I'm going to hold your 25% until the market turns around and you can sell this thing. I mean, they did it here locally with a building.
But again,
as they were
like, are
selling
there enough
units.
builders who can do that for all of like that many units?
And
Like, it's
oddly enough, I
stretch.
actually have a bit of strength in the fact that I think Toronto will be able to pull through. The other thing I think is going to happen is people will sell. Like people might have to take a loss. Like they put in 20% and they have to sell the condo at 85 or 90% of what they paid.
or they just don't get the profit, right? Like maybe it's a bit of a wash.
Or it's a
because
wash,
There's going to be
yeah.
other people that do have money that can scoop in and say, well, I'm not going to buy it for
there's 100,000 new people
25% higher than you bought it for, but I'll buy it for what you paid for it.
and
If you want to get all your money back, and then I'll have the equity. Maybe I won't sell it. Maybe I actually will sit on it, but I'm walking into hundreds of thousands of dollars of equity from day one because I can get the mortgage and I can float this, whereas you can't. You have the equity, but you can't qualify for the mortgage.
It's not worth anything then. The other thing is, like you said, rental rates are through the roof. So a lot of these again were sold on pretense rental rates, and that's how they qualify like the idea of buying them is because like you're going to probably get 2,100. Well, now they're probably going to get 2,600. So there's a lot of people that will want to buy there. And we saw the immigration numbers. There'll probably be another 150,000 people that land in Toronto next year. So oddly enough, I have this weird faith. The other thing is the loonies. I mean, it had a bit of a bump recently, but loonie overall isn't super strong, and there's potential that external markets are going to look at Canada to invest more money in these Toronto, BC areas, and condos are the way they love to do it.
Yeah, I don't think the influx of immigrants is necessarily gonna buoy that up because I just don't think it's the clientele, because I think most of these were going to be investments to then be rented or something like that.
Immigrants work together though, man. Like a 2-bedroom, like they'll come in there with 3 families and buy it.
Okay.
No, seriously, that's what they do, man. And they don't necessarily even live in it. They might just go rent it out, but they'll work together as a group and be like, we each qualify for 200 grand. Let's put it together. They're not afraid at all to do that.
Yeah.
Like we even said when we talked
invented the
about
joint venture.
They invented the JV, man. Like they are the OG JV players. So I brought up last time because I was like, man, I feel like this is gonna be a collapse on all hell. And now as time goes on, everyone's messaging me like, man, there's so many immigrants coming. Man, Toronto's so strong. Man, rents are up. Like you're too pessimistic. And now I'm just like, all right, screw it. You know what? Everything's gonna be fine. If you go to Toronto, put like 15 condos under contract. Just do it. You'll make all the money back. It's fine.
This guy runs hot and cold, man.
Yeah, exactly.
He's all doom and gloom, and now he's all bull again.
Now I'm bullish. I have something under contract, so I'm like super bullish.
I know. It's funny. I saw this article, and I saved it, and then it's like, I won't even bother. But I see it on your list.
Wait, which one's this? Oh, well, I don't want to make it this podcast about like save the landlord, but I kind of had to when I saw this one.
It's a bad one too,
and it is a bad one. And the reason I'm wrote it down, I was actually going to tell you it after we talked about our crazy stories, and then I decided not to. But I'll stop beating around the bush here. I'll just read you the title. This is from CBC News. Man sleeping in his car says tenant owes more than $31,000 and will not leave his rental property. Ontario government's trying to speed up the tenancy hearings, but is struggling to do so. The story is, this man's name is Marco. He doesn't give his full name because he's a mortgage broker. He had 2 homes. He went through a split in his relationship.
Yeah.
She took one property. He took the other. Since then...
Took the wrong one, Marco.
Don't do him like that. He's still sleeping in his car, Chandler.
Sorry.
Okay? Since January... he has been unable to reclaim his home. Also, the tenants have not paid rent during that time. So he's like, I am paying all the housing expenses, the mortgage, the property taxes, everything there. I'm drowning in it, so I can't actually afford to go rent or buy another house. But I do own a home, and I can't get in to my property. And he said he's filed complaints about both of the tenants to the landlord board. But because there's a giant backlog from the pandemic, he's just in queue like everybody else. And
he's homeless.
Yeah.
Right. So, and here's these things like everyone wants to be so, binary. You must be all this thing or all another thing. Well, we're all really quick to line up and support unhoused individuals, but everyone also wants to hate landlords. So here's a nice paradox or whatever it is for someone out there who wants to be so ignorant and blind to nuance. Say, okay, you want to hate landlords, but what about this unhoused person? Like he's legitimately been unhoused because his private property is being squatted in by someone who is breaking the law, right? Like it's not a criminal offense, but if you break the rules of
effectively a squatter in his home,
it's 100% a squatter in his home. So whether it's trespassing or it's just in violation of tenancy law, and it's caused this person to be homeless. And still there will be people who just post like, screw that guy anyway. That serves him right for trying to profiteer off blah, blah. Oh, I guess he should have made a smart investment. Like it's not dissimilar to that other story we talked about where someone went through a split, right? Yeah. And needed to move back into their private property. We still do have something to protect private property rights in Canada, last I checked. And this is enraging. Yeah. And the fact that this person isn't getting more support because it's the same trolls online, just ripping them apart.
100%. He's 8 months into this process. He's hired a paralegal, and he said all that they've been able to get, because there's no ever phone numbers for tenancy board, and you can never speak to anyone directly. He said all he's gotten is the automated response emails. Like when you submit a form, they just keep submitting forms, paralegals submitting forms, and all they get is automated responses.
Yeah.
This is supposed to be a 3-month process to be able to reclaim your property. Most people say it's a minimum of a year before you even get close to starting that process. And we're not trying to make this a thing about just like feel bad for the landlords, because there's lots of stuff going both ways. But I think it's good that landlords are starting to speak out a little bit and kind of make their side known as well, because it was all tenants for a long time, and that's how I think a lot of these rules and changes kind of landed in place.
Yeah.
And so landlords need to speak up and be like, hey, we're getting trampled over here. And there's a lot of smaller people that really can't do much about it.
And if we can get to a situation where an injustice like this, which happens to be at the expense of the landlord, can be remedied in a timely fashion, then the same will be true for any tenants who are being mistreated. So a strong tenancy board that is fast, that has authority, that can penalize violators is what everyone wants, both landlords and tenants. It's for the good of both sides. So when you see something like this going on, it's important that regardless if you're a landlord or a tenant, you advocate for what's right and what's wrong and for an efficient tenancy board in your area.
Try not to be so biased.
What's that?
Try not to be so biased.
Man.
I have one, this is a bit of an aside, but I have one client who is basically like, well, if tenancy board is not going to help out or kind of work with me, I'm just going to do it the way I want to do it. And I'm not going to get super explicit on what he's done, but he's always gotten his units back. Whether it means going and visiting the tenants quite abruptly, or literally just removing doors, windows, and heating systems, and turning them into effectively like uninhabitable spaces. And he's like, they don't pay rent, they don't leave, they don't follow any of the rules. I'm not going to follow any of the rules.
Yeah, it erodes into vigilantism or whatever you want to call it on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just terrible. But what else you got?
Well, let's switch it up.
Oh, okay.
From the real world
oh God, here we
to
go.
Chandler's favorite place, the VR world.
I wish I had a headset right now so I could.
Chandler's
going
to try one out. If anyone's tried one out, let us know what you thought. I think Halifax used to have a VR gaming spot. I don't know if they do anymore, do they? I think it might be gone now.
There's one.
Yeah.
There was one in Gottingen? Really?
Is there one now in Gottingen? Yeah. So we should try and do a day down there. Palladium's got it too.
Does?
Everyone's got it. Chandler's gonna have it soon. You watch. One of the kids gonna be like,
no, it's
what
not
do you
gonna
what did
happen.
you ask Santa for? And he's gonna be like
reality.
Oculus Rift.
I'm still set on this world. I still have faith in this world.
Okay, before I get into this, I want to talk about what I saw that I thought two things I saw about VR that might kind of change your mind. One, I think is going to be they're going to be very polar. So one I saw was a water slide VR. So it's a water slide park, and they strap a waterproof VR headset onto you, and you go down the slide, and it's like you're in like when you're watching, it's like they have 3 different options. I think it's a fighter pilot, a dragon, and some other like Superman thing. But just imagine the feeling that you get when you're going down a water slide. But now if you have this headset on, so you can't see your surroundings, all you can see is that you're in a fighter pilot cockpit seat, you would get the feeling of the G-forces and like kind of flying around as you're going down. It would actually...
So you go down an actual water slide?
It's an actual water slide. You're in an actual water slide on the tube, flying along with the VR headset on. This is actually going on. I think it's in Georgia. There's a water park in Georgia that does this. But imagine how cool that would feel. Like, because the biggest thing...
We're so spoiled. It's like, this water slide's a little boring.
Well, also to put out there how crazy the water slide is they converted like a Boeing 747, and the water slide comes out of the side of the Boeing 747. This is a water park in Georgia. So the water park's insane to begin with. America. Big America.
Oh my
God.
Imagine
strapping on this headset. I think that'd be very cool, because the few times I've used them, the one thing that kind of lacks sometimes is your motion doesn't match what you're visually seeing.
Right.
If it's like an action thing. And so this would give you that feeling of flying. And what it does is it picks
or riding
up,
a dragon.
Or haven't done that before? It picks up the surroundings around you, so it matches your speed and the way that the plane of the dragon moves based on where you are inside the pipe.
How does it work when I go down the water slide? It's like it's stuck going slow.
The dragon stalls out midair and collapses.
Will I still feel the wedgie of my bathing suit? Can it remove that as well?
The other one, and this one I think is going to kind of blow your mind. the creator of the Oculus Rift, I forget, I don't have his name here. My girlfriend showed this to me just before I came over. The creator of the Oculus Rift is creating a new headset that would actually kill you. And the idea is when you're playing the game, imagine the heightened risk. Basically, the idea is that I think is that when you're in there playing the game or whatever you're doing, it adds that level of intensity and making it more realistic. And I'm like, this is kind of insane, but I can kind of see some of this taking off. Not maybe killing you, not killing you, don't worry, not killing you, but I can see something inflicting some sort of feedback, whether it be pain or something along those lines, to give you a heightened feeling. Because I can already see, like, when I was playing Call of Duty when I was 15, if you told me I could put on a suit and wear a headset, feel like I'm an actual soldier, and then feel like a punch in the arm when someone shot me, that would have been sick. Like, all I had was a little controller vibrating in my hand going,
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
So there's actually a show, I think it's either on Amazon or it's on Netflix, that I've only watched one episode of it. No, but it's very Black Mirror-esque, where this brother-sister, like, they kind of go into these VR systems, and I think what they're hinting at is that it's actually going to be real, and she's testing out a new version, and it feels more real than it ever has before, and increasingly, like, she can't leave the thing at her discretion. Only, like, the game can decide when she wants to cut off, and I think it's headed to a place where, you know, parallel universes or that sort of experience, but it is this idea that what happens in the VR is actually going to have real ramifications, both physically making her sick or injured or whatever, but also potentially in the real world.
100%. And I'm going to read so I found the details here. It's Palmer Luckey. Some of you guys might know him. He created Oculus, sold to Facebook for $2 billion. This is what he said about why he's creating the headset. He said, you instantly raise the stakes to the maximum level and force people to fundamentally rethink how they interact with the virtual world and the players inside of it. And I can see that. Imagine how intense something would be knowing you could legitimately die.
Yeah, but imagine, like, then you don't even, like, die in combat. Like, a virtual bus just hits you when you cross the sidewalk. And, like,
also, the helmet looks kind of messed. Like, we're going to have to flash this up, but look.
That's going to zap you to death? Is that how it works?
I'm just like, what is this? Little, like, blades going to your brain?
That's crazy. Not into it.
Anyways, what I was actually here to talk about, these are just two little asides that I saw after. I'm sure once you click on one VR article, like, all of your feed
like,
from there on is this.
Go down this rabbit hole.
But the World Economic Forum interviewed Mark Rose, the CEO of Avison Young. For those of you who don't know what Avison Young is, they're a commercial property broker for leasing and selling or buying commercial properties in space at a very high level. Like, we're talking apartment buildings, office towers.
They're massive.
Yeah, they're massive. Industrial warehouses. They're a very, very big company, and they're international. And so they were interviewing him about what he thought about the metaverse. And I was curious because I feel like he's probably from a time of, like, I sell actual warehouses and office towers. This is stupid. But he was actually very optimistic in feeling that it is the next foreground. Like, it is the next space for real estate. And he said it's very exciting that he's seeing transactions have been taking place there for a very long time. And there is a ton of value for brands, especially ones that sell products, which is pretty much every brand, to gain space and start to create an experience for their customers. And it's a cleaner way to transact. And I, like, thinking about it a little bit, I was like, I pretty much shop online now. I talk to a lot of people and they shop online for increasingly a larger and larger percentage of what they buy. And, like, I find myself, okay, I'm looking at a shirt and, like, they're doing pretty good at the photos, but if I was in VR, I'd get an even better perspective of what that shirt looked like, how it would fit on different people, even how it would look in different scenarios. And so, like, there's a lot of opportunity there. His kind of, I guess, example was Gucci sold a bag on the metaverse for more money than they sell any of their bags for in the real world. And he's like, if this kind of stuff is happening, I know it was a bit of a bubble in that time, but if that kind of stuff's happening, it's here to stay. And he genuinely thinks that metaverse real estate will prove to be extremely valuable. Now, again, I think we've talked about it a bunch in the past, and there's a lot of things to be ironed out, but I'm still super bullish that the metaverse is going to be the place, and Chandler's going to wear a headset all the time.
Yeah, I think it's kind of an attempt to it's an attempt at a do-over, because in some form or another, the internet, the World Wide Web, whatever, is kind of free, right? Like, you can set up a domain, and obviously there are things that you can buy through the internet and all that, but the barrier to entry is kind of
It's
non-existent.
$89.99, bells, fiber up internet.
Yeah,
you get a
like-
promo for the first 3 months, then it goes up a lot.
So the access is kind of free. Obviously, there are these gatekeeper systems, search engine, paywalls, all of this sort of stuff. But I feel like the metaverse is a chance to redo the internet and give it a truly like capitalized component where rather than having a URL, which has some value because obviously if you happen to be lucky enough to have Nike.com, you could have sold it to them for a lot of money. But being able to actually build exclusive space within the internet effectively and have that able to hold value is kind of a way of rewriting the fact that the internet was sort of given away for free in a lot of ways. And now I'm worried that it's just going to be a way to monetize the internet under the guise of, oh no, but it's virtual reality now. It's like, well, like you already had a website. You probably could have added just a virtual reality component to your existing website, but now I'm going to have to go through a portal to access, a paid space.
So you're
that
saying
allows you to-
basically it's more capitalized and controlled
Exactly.
versus
Because
the
the
regular
internet
internet?
is shockingly for how the internet's not tangible, but its impact in our life is tangible. Like it is the most valuable, not real thing, like not physical thing ever in the history of the world, in this really abstract way. But it has almost very little individual value. I'm trying to word this.
I
in
think
a way
I
that
get what
makes
you're
sense,
saying. I agree with some portion of it, except for the fact that I think the metaverse needs to be its own thing, because that'd be like saying the internet was great, like we can go on there and browse for all the different companies, but prior to that, each company could have just had its own piece of software. So either you would have had 900 programs on your computer because you'd be like, I have the Nike program, I have
Yeah.
the Gucci program. So they put all of those together in one platform as the internet, right? So I think to do a virtual space for each of those websites now would be difficult. And I think a lot are trying to do it, and a lot of them have their own little spaces, but to amass all of it onto one system and area, be it the metaverse, I think makes sense. Because I feel like as time goes on here, people are not going to want to be removing and putting on the headsets all the time, right? I think they'll put them on and enter that space, and they'll be in that space all the time.
I guess the cynic in me just says this will be a way to be sold, even just access to this space. Because right now, it's more or less, and the world, especially the Western world, is trying to trend towards free internet for all. Like free internet for all isn't necessarily great for a lot of business people out there who want to try to capitalize on the internet. And here's a great way to do it, creating effectively a new internet experience that people are going to have to pay to access, I feel.
I agree and disagree on one other thing, is that you look at like video streaming. Every company tried to charge for it. YouTube made it completely free by mixing in some ads, and they became the most successful. And I think the new expectation now is everything's free, and you make your money by monetizing things within your content or monetizing things that you can sell, right? It's even like content creators now. YouTubers spend as much money per episode on their YouTube channels as TV shows do. But a TV show, you have to pay for cable and you're guaranteed a certain amount of commercials. YouTubers, you can just click, you can Google any of them and watch all of their stuff for free. And so I think the metaverse will be free, but I think it'll be monetized by each space. Like I think there'll be certain spaces you have to pay to enter. But I think most brands will just see like it's like all the old brands that didn't invest in a website at first. They're like, we're not doing online sales. And then like,
Right.
whoa, everyone's making a fortune online sales and nobody comes to our store anymore. Now we're doing these super beautiful websites and all these promos to sell online. I feel like it'll be the same for the metaverse. And I think our world has this expectation that everything can kind of be freely accessed. I don't know. It's weird.
still
We
hate
haven't
it.
talked about it a bit.
But no, that's interesting to hear that the space is still evolving because it has kind of gone to the back burner with a lot of these things. Everyone starts reaching for the stars and coming up with crazy ideas and spending money on R&D when things are humming along. But I have even noticed, like, look at all the layoffs that are going to be happening in the tech space. We talked about that months ago, and we were early because the job market's still super strong, but it does seem to be coming. And even, will Meta be still this enthused to dump millions and hundreds of millions of dollars into this research of this space right now in a shrinking economy? I don't know.
I think Meta's going to force their hand here, though. You saw Zuckerberg laid off a bunch of people, but he also cut a ton of leases. And I genuinely believe his new platform is going to be that everyone's going to come in through the metaverse. Or
Right.
if, like, you know what I mean? Like, if you want to stay on, you're going to come in through the metaverse and you're going to start working, and they're going to start pushing it
Forced
to go
adoption.
forced
Yeah.
adoption. You know how we're going to start doing it if this podcast actually grows to be big? Is
We'll
I'm going to
never
move
see
to the
Neal in
States.
person again.
I'm going to move to the States to buy real estate, and then to be able to do this, we're both going to have to throw on a headset.
Oh God, I'll just be here with the camera, taking it old school. Listen, we're gonna pivot into our main topic, which is about how to make $1 million if you had to start over again. But first, I wanted to highlight something very real here in the real world because I wanted to get your thoughts on it. StatCan
world.
released their figures on building permits,
Yep.
and in September nationally, building permits dropped by $10.2 billion across the country.
Yeah. So
That's down
Canadian building
17
costs, what's that, like 300 units?
That's down 17.5%, and that includes like everything was down across all survey components. So that includes renovations, new construction, residential, commercial, etc. Everything was down across the board, but it's mainly skewed again by Ontario. That was down 32%. Here in Nova Scotia, we actually had a big month for building permits, but nationally down 17.5%. That has to mean something, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's thousands and thousands of apartments. That is multiple office towers. That is a shitload of warehousing. That is a ton of houses. Like, that is...
53 residential projects in the Greater Toronto area alone have been shelved.
Yeah, and so they're probably
53,
averaging...
how many units per?
I'd say probably an average of 200. Like, they build big
Yeah.
towers. So they're talking probably about a few thousand units in Toronto alone, because that's multi-res.
10,000. 250.
Oh, wow. Yeah, sorry, my bad. My math way off. 10,000 units. Additionally, then there'll be all the single-family homes that also got axed that gets included in that permit price. So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of good, I think, in some ways, because it's showing the government and that they need to do something to aid in construction, because they just can't do it. Like, we cannot build or create housing and make it. It's not even affordable. It's not even like purchasable.
Available.
Like, it's
Yeah,
not even
yeah, yeah,
available.
yeah.
It's not even at a level that someone could even purchase. Doesn't even, like, even if it's too, like, okay, so all condos are $2 million then. And it's like, you know what I mean? It's at a point where it's just no one could even get into it. And so hopefully it incentivizes them to change some stuff around housing development, and maybe try to eventually create some programs that benefit developers. And I think when they do that, to basically save face and help their political campaigns, they will create campaigns that maybe help change the public's perception of developers. Like, hey, look,
God.
you know,
Ooh.
well, no, because that's how they get votes, right? So if whatever they do, then they have to get the public to bite into it. So if they're like, okay, we're going to drop rates, or we're going to give huge incentives to build housing projects, everyone's going to be like, yo, what the hell? Screw the developers. They're a bunch of rich guys.
Yep.
They'll then, to try and save face, be like, look, we need the housing. They'll also create campaigns of explaining kind of like why we need the housing, what benefit developers offer. Like, I think those will go hand in hand.
Yeah. Now you
just-
really are in the imaginary world. No, I hope you're right. I hope you're right. Like, but this is also the exact same thing that Tim Houston sort of campaigned on. It's like, no, we understand where the landlord's coming from, and rent caps just don't make sense. And you know, we
Boom,
need,
3 years of rent caps.
we need our landlords to be successful and to thrive and to produce more units. And then when it came time to to be popular and get votes, he just went for the low hanging fruit that flies in, you know, direct opposition to not only what he said, but sound economics. But that's another.
I mean, it's concerning. And again, we've talked about just a few episodes ago, and a bunch of you guys have sent to both of us. It's just like crazy immigration numbers. We've talked about it. We've talked about building costs 100 times. Something's got to give. Something's got to give. Not to keep harping on that, but that is crazy to see that many got cut.
Yeah. So anything else you want to get into? You want to outline?
No. So yeah, let's outline our topic of today, and that is if we lost everything, started from zero. We didn't have a single asset to our name, have no career. We're at dead zero right now. We're starting fresh. What would we do?
How much clean slate? Okay.
Yeah. You have nothing left. It's just you, the boys, and Lana.
Oh, okay.
But you have nothing. Maybe the Lexus that you got smashed up in, that you got your first down payment from. Yeah, so you have nothing, and you need to make your first $1 million. And now speed's not necessarily the thing, but it's about how would you make your first $1 million.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I the parameters of the question are kind of a little bit tricky because obviously someone needs a job and needs a roof over their head. So depending on how deep you want to go into it.
Okay, fine. You have a job and a roof over your head,
Okay.
but it's a rental roof, so there's no
Yeah, okay.
refinancing that. And the job has you spend 100% of your income.
Okay. And am I going first on this?
Yes.
Okay. On the hot seat. I did take some time to think about it because I've thought about this a number of times myself. I mean, I don't want to say I stumbled into a career in real estate sales. It was just the only avenue I knew of, being pretty naive. And
Nobody grows up wanting to be a realtor.
apparently they do now, but yeah, once upon a time it was not the case. But I knew I wanted to be involved in real estate. I looked around at my city and saw the people doing the sort of things that I wanted to do were all involved in real estate. I saw my friends who had families involved in real estate, and I thought it was not only exciting, but obviously provided them a good livelihood for them and their families. So I was always interested in it. And then I kind of fell into it backwards through being a real estate agent. And I don't mean that in a disparaging way. Like I really enjoy what I do. But at the time, that's how I thought I could get into real estate. I was like, I will sell it, and then that will help me buy it. And again, there just weren't the same number of resources around that there are today, because I didn't think of things like being a project manager, or just like some people, having no 9 to 5 and just going into flipping houses and how that, what that would look like. That was around as an idea, but there wasn't as much information. It wasn't as easy to access private money, that sort of stuff. So I sometimes think, what would I do differently if I were starting in today's climate? So I kind of batted that about in my head, and the thing I landed on is, maybe people might think it's a little bit oversimplified, but my focus would be on mentorship. And the reason I say that is because when I did come to a conclusion sometimes of, if I were to change fields, because hey, it wasn't always roses and sunshine for realtors over the last 15 years. There were some times where I seriously contemplated changing career paths in challenging markets and trying to provide for my family and trying to have a quality of life, that I thought about this. And I always said what I would do at the time is I would find the company that most interested me, and there's a couple big real estate companies here in town, and I would go there and I would start in the metaphorical mailroom. Not that there's a mailroom anymore, but I would start at whatever position they would give me, and then I would bust my butt to work up through there. However, that doesn't necessarily lend itself towards $1 million.
No,
yes,
not in a quick turnaround.
Not a quick turnaround. But it brought me back to this idea of mentorship, which I'm just a huge, huge believer in, and I wish I went out and sought even more mentors still to this day. But my plan would be that I would find a mentor and try to bring them an opportunity that also create an opportunity for myself. We said this early on when we started creating this platform. What we wanted to do was to share ideas, and we tell people out there that there's enough real estate and business to go around, that you should be asking people around you, setting up meetings, just picking people's brain, because anyone who's genuinely successful, they're going to share their knowledge with you, because they are big thinkers, and a big thinker never tries to hoard information or keep other people down, because it's just not a mindset towards expansion. So people are usually pretty generous with their time and their knowledge if you hit them up. So the thing with looking for a mentor is, if you want to have people around you that are challenging you and building each other up together, kind of at the same state as you might be in. You also need people who are maybe 5 years ahead of you, right? So you can learn from them and try to turn their 5-year growth into maybe a 2-year timeline. But for something like this, and just in general, you should kind of have like your stretch mentor. You know how you have stretch goals in business? You should have a stretch mentor. And the way I've thought of it, and people who like Grant Cardone will love this, is like find a mentor that is whatever your dream times 10. So if your dream is to own 100 units, you need to talk to someone who owns 1,000 units. Maybe your dream is just own a duplex, and talking to someone who owns 20 units is where you need to be. But you need to find someone that, whatever your aspiration is, a mentor should be 10 times that, because then they will really be able to assist you. The other thing is
10x.
Good old 10x. The other thing is, a mentor of this type should be able to write a check for whatever your dream is. So coming back to our challenge here, if your dream is to get $1 million, the mentor that I would be seeking out in this situation would be someone who could write a check for $1 million. And there are people like that out there.
Remember in stages, because if your dream is to get $1 billion, you're probably not going to get the first guy to be able to write a check for $1 billion.
No, but like,
I know what you mean. I was bugging you.
Find someone like if you want to grow to $1 million net worth and as quick as you can with this imaginary reset, finding a mentor who conceivably could write that check is a good place to look for leadership and look for influence. So I would find that person, and there are a number of them around town. Wherever you are, there is someone in your community. It might surprise you who they are, but there are people out there who do have access to that amount of money. And I don't mean this because then you would ask them for $1 million check. That'd be the easiest way.
That actually would be, yes.
Yeah. Throw yourself in front of their vehicle.
Watch your head.
Yeah. Find out if they've got a really attractive son or daughter, and marry into that family. No, but this is what I would do. And I kind of wrote it down here because I was wrapping my head around it. So I would find this mentor that is 10x of my dream. In this case, it's someone that's 10x of $1 million or could write a check for $1 million. And then I would effectively volunteer myself, be it to work at their company, shadow them, help them in any way I can, and work my way into their business and make myself valuable to their business, either on contract or not. Then what I would do is I would get them to define a scalable opportunity that I could bring to them that they would say yes to today, which is basically sitting them down and say, hey, listen, if I could find something like, what are you looking for that if I brought it to you, you would buy it today? And they might say, well, I'm looking for a hotel at such and such price per door, or, if you could find me land right now that I could, as of right, build this. And I'm using real estate examples here, but whatever the equivalent would be in the space, give them something like an offer they couldn't refuse, something that's too good to pass up.
Yep.
And I would work with them to make them tell me what that is, right? Because a lot of people, they say, oh, I might be interested in that. I might be interested in this. Like, no, I want to know the thing that if I brought it to you today, you would sign the check today. You would buy that. If that came across your desk, because how many times have you guys, I know a lot of people out there hustling for investors and side money and partners and blah, 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 run into people who talk a big game and then the rubber hits the road and all of a sudden they flake, right? So you really need to pin people down, say, if I bring this to you, you would, and it met the criteria A, B, C, D, E, F, G, whatever your criteria are. If I brought it to you today, you would say yes to it. And once I've got them pinned down to that, I would channel all of my effort in bringing that to them, with a component of it that gets me paid, right? So if that's something they say, listen, I'm going to use a real estate example. I want to buy 40 doors in this area at this price per door. If you bring me that, I don't care about anything else, I will buy it, right? So then I go out and I would try to find that property, ideally get it for a less price per door, and I get the extra money, or a partnership stake, etc. And this is where the last part of this is that the opportunity needs to include an equity or money for you, and then it has to be a scalable process. And this is something that you kind of did, I think, to some degree. Mm-hmm. You proved the model. You found someone willing to take a risk on you that said, listen, if you brought me something here that I could return, 10% on my money inside of 12 months, yeah, I would sign that today. And you prove it with, say, a 6 unit, and then immediately scale that up. It's like, all right, I did it with 6 units. I can then do the simple math and do it with 40 units. So that's a real long-winded response, but broken down, it would be kind of a 10x mentor, an opportunity that they would not refuse if you brought it to them today, and then make sure that opportunity would allow for you to get payment in the form of equity or actual cash, and then make sure that opportunity is scalable so that once you have success with it once with them, you can go back to them and replicate it, and that's how you would scale it. Maybe you make $100,000 on the first one or $200,000, but by the third or fourth, you could be making $1 million on one project if you had the right opportunity for them.
So to summarize, if you don't have a rich find a rich daddy.
Yeah, I guess so.
One thing, this is a saying that
mommy. Yeah. Or mommy.
Or mommy. Yes, 100% or mommy. One saying that I've heard, and I've said it on here before, is don't learn how to buy a Rolls Royce from someone who drives a Toyota Corolla.
I love that one. I
And
remember you saying this before.
There is some merit to it, right? Like I learned that, and I don't mean like specifically that, because you can finance a car pretty heavily, and there's a lot of times that people who drive Toyota Corollas have more money than somebody who drives a Rolls Royce.
Can
But
confirm.
yeah. Anyways, like that was. But the concept of like, you can't learn how to be. Like if you want to be a certain type of person or a specific person, you can't learn to be that person from someone who hasn't done it or isn't there, right? Like you said, you need to find that mentor that's in that position.
And if you want $1 million, you better be shooting for $10 million.
At least.
Yeah.
At least. And the other thing I want to say with this is don't have too much pride. Like when you go to work for some of these people, like you literally might have to spit shine shoes to start to gain respect.
Yeah.
Because I've seen that before, where some people's pride sometimes get in the way of being able to do this. So like I went to work for him, and all he got me to do is do some bitch work and run around. And I'm like, you had to kind of earn the ability to gain that knowledge. And it's not that they're just so great, but that education, knowledge, and those opportunities that they'll provide you are extremely, extremely valuable. And so you need to pay respects towards that. It's not just because there's some great person that deserves to have their shoes shined, but that education that you want, and they have something you want, you got to do what you need to do to get it. And if you can't stomach that, you can keep looking around. But I think a lot of times pride does get in the way. But the last thing I'm going to add, and I think it pertains to what I'm going to talk about as well, is whatever you bring them, if it's an opportunity. Real estate's a little more simple. If they say, hey, I want this, and you go get it for them, it's a little easier. But if you bring something to them as an opportunity, make sure that you are ultra educated. And there's pretty much every industry and everything you want to do, you can go online and you can find some resource that'll teach you at least the basics. It'll teach you the verbiage, the things that you need to know to at least get your head wrapped around a little bit, so that you can go and talk to these people on an educated level, because that's what they're looking for. Because I can say for somebody in those positions, they get offers all the time, right? Everyone's got an idea like, yo, I got this amazing idea for a cereal dispenser attached to a toilet. And you're like, you know what?
Never leave the house.
Yeah. And you're like, not the worst idea, but do you have the background to be able to make this happen? So anyways, but I like what you said, and I'm 100% in agreement. And to what Chandler said about me doing something similar to this, I think I did less mentoring, and I think I did more the education, and then go out and find the people that could invest in my ideas. And basically, I became ultra educated and got people who would invest in the idea. But the biggest thing that I would take from that was that if I went looking for $1 million, I would only ask somebody that had like $25 or $50 million. Because if you ask someone who's got $2 million for $1 million, you know,
it's not gonna happen.
They're not going to cut you a check for 50% of their money. Like it's just not going to happen. So you got to be able to ask somebody for 5% of their dough or less, so that they literally don't even have to think about it, or it's a much lower risk for them. So anyways, that's my one take on that. Now, my way of doing it, I liked the way that I made my first $1 million, to be honest, and I would recommend it to a lot of people, and I feel like I help a lot of my clients and friends do that. And that is the concept of either fundraising capital or using your own money to flip forward properties, whether it's buy and sell. But I like the idea of buying and refinancing, because then you're more in control. You have rental income, and it's really easy to build net worth through the equity portion. But I'm not going to give that because it's boring and everybody says it.
I was going to say, like, your advice is just do exactly what we already did.
No, I was saying that I'm just explaining what I did, and I do stand by that as a great idea.
100%. This is more like, I thought we're going scorched earth, had to start from zero.
But I'm saying scorched earth.
Payment. Yeah.
I'm saying scorched earth, no down payment, and no extra expendable income, which I mean it's probably gonna make this a little bit tough now that I think about that specifically. But I would probably go into short-term renting of items. And now what that means is, I don't necessarily mean real estate. I mean pretty much anything. It could be a car. So short-term renting, like whatever you have, there is probably a rental market. There is a rental market for electronics. There is a rental market for cars. There is a rental market for trailers. There's a rental market for everything. So if you don't have extra dough, you say, you know what, I'm going to take the bus this week. I'm going to rent my car on Turo to make $500.
Or triage other people's stuff.
That was my next step.
Oh, sorry.
That was my next step.
I got excited there.
That was my next step. So then and to what Chandler just said, so triaging would be like, and I had people do this to my apartments, and I know people in Halifax that have had a very successful model doing this. They will go out and rent apartments. Let's say it's a 1-bedroom for $1,700. They'll then go out and get them furnished on a line of credit from a Leon's or a home, what do they call it, the Brick. They'll finance the furniture from them, get them furnished, and then they will Airbnb them out for $3,000-$4,000 a month. They'll handle the cleaning, they'll handle the management, and now they're making $2,000 a month extra. So that's an option, is triaging out those units. The one that I really wanted to explain, and I saw recently, was financing a trailer, like a camper trailer.
Mm-hmm.
They offer, in Canada, they offer 10 to 15 years of financing on them. In the States, they go up to 25 years. So you can get a $50,000 trailer that has bedroom space for 8.
For 8?
For 8.
Okay.
So 4 beds for $500 a month. Brand new.
And then you
and
rent
then
it, basically.
there's a ton of platforms online like Arvezi, Outdoorsy, Going RVing. There's all these different apps now.
Interesting.
And it's no big deal to ask $250, $300 a night on a weekend, $350, weekdays $200. You would be surprised how many people will book them for a week, right? Because for me, I want to go out trailer camping, but I'm not going to buy a $50,000 trailer for the 1 week of the year that I might go every 3 years. So I'll give somebody $1,500 for that week, even though their payment for that whole month was $500.
Yeah.
And so you get that, you do, and I did some quick numbers. If you buy one, I looked one up right now, with 8% interest, the current financing, no down payment, and again, they approve everybody on these things. Sleeps 8, it was, let's say, assuming it rented for $250 a day, and we got 50% occupancy throughout the year.
Okay, that's reasonable. Yeah,
because during the summer, I think you'd be fully booked, and I think you'd get more than $200, $250. That brings in $42,000 a year. Okay, your payments cost about $6,500, $7,000 with tax. Let's say maintenance is another $3,000 in cleaning and little supplies. Even say $8,000. So you spend $15,000 to own the thing. You brought in $42,000. You just made $27,000 on one trailer on the side. And you're not going with the trailer. Like, you are literally receiving this thing at your home or wherever you live, or if you have a little holding yard somewhere, you're cleaning it and off it goes again. And so you get 5 or 6 of these, you're going to be making an extra couple $100,000 a year. Right off the hop, a business like that's probably worth about 3 to 4x multiple. So if you do this with 5 trailers, you make $200,000 profit in a year. You are already now at a multiple of around $600,000 to $800,000 of value in your business. You're almost a millionaire within 1 year of doing this.
That's a good point.
And a lot of these businesses, I wish I'd done these, because you know what? These businesses are more scalable without my involvement. And like, I see people that do this, and they'll have 20 or 30 of these trailers, and they'll have a little staff. They'll have an admin that does all the bookings, and they'll have a single person that does all the maintenance and cleanings, or a cleaning person and a little maintenance person. And so they profit on 20 trailers. They're profiting $500,000-$600,000. They have a payroll of $200,000. They're making $300,000-$400,000 with minimal input. And so that's why I wouldn't necessarily do the sales job that I did again, because as a realtor, I'm only making my money when I'm out there selling. Yeah. Right? It's very tough to make money on a secondary person as a realtor. But a business like this, in the short-term game, you can make a ton of money. I've met people who do it with cars. I was in Texas and I rented a car from one, and he had like 40 cars. And what he did, he had an arrangement with the hotel next to the airport. And so in the back parking lot, they had a gravel space that they never filled up. He had all of his cars. He had a bunch of Hyundai Accents, a million of them lined up, and he'd rent them out for $40 a day. But down there, I talked to him. He said, they're $99 biweekly, but I rent them for $49 to $69 a day. Right now, cars are a little tougher because there's a lot of maintenance items, but a trailer is nice,
and the
because it's mobile.
stuff is like a little bit different, obviously. But
totally,
I think what's interesting about both models, very different though they are, and we didn't talk about this before, so it's kind of it's curious to hear the thoughts.
Go ahead, Franz.
But they're both about two things. One, leveraging, money that's not your own, be it financing, these things that you're going to triage, or someone who has it when you don't. Effectively becoming a middle person.
That's sales. That's what every business is.
Totally. It's if I bring you this, like, what is it worth to me?
Yeah.
And you need it. You've raised your hand, said, I need this. I will sign on this. And it's like, all right, how do I get, A to B, right, without any real cost to me, and I'm just the facilitator.
You make a good point, and the thing I'm going to say to that is, like, I think a lot of people think that you need to create something new to make money, and I used to think like that, and I still would love to do that. Or that you need
the thing. You need to own the thing that you're selling or you're capitalizing on. You don't necessarily. You can just deliver it.
You don't need to own the thing. Leverage is very important to grow a business, even if you, like, everyone's like, oh, cash is king, which it can be in some sense, but if you look at the world's largest companies, $1 trillion businesses, billion-dollar businesses, all the billionaires on the Forbes 500, they all carry debt. There's not one of those people, I bet you, that has no debt, and none of those businesses that have no debt, even if they have the cash. Like Apple carries debt, but also carries $500 billion in cash, and it's like they could pay off all their debt, but it's just stupid too, because if you can borrow money for an X percentage but make more from it, it doesn't cost you anything, but you just get profits. So there's that aspect, but the creation of something that's how I used to always think, because I watched so much Dragon's Den, and I always see the news stories of
you need a thing.
Yeah, you need a thing that's been created, but that world is a mixture of like obviously utmost intelligence, tons of hard work. I would say tons of trials and tribulations of doing it over and over and over again and re-improving it. And then there's an aspect of luck and timing that you can't necessarily control.
Oh my God, the failure rate's 98%?
98, 97, whatever. It's super high because there's a million ideas out there and there's so much that goes into making something successful. And again, those stories that you hear online sometimes seem too easy. It's like, well, my kid had a science fair and then he designed a sponge, and then everybody loved the sponge at the science fair. They wanted to buy it. So we thought, why don't we get 10 of them for $3? And then we sold them all. And then for some reason, Lori Granger and Kevin O'Leary came to the science fair, and they offered my kid $4 million for 10% equity in his science fair company. And I'm like, yeah, that's not going to happen. Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's so much luck and timing involved in something like that I don't know that it's a replicable way of making your first $1 million. And you'll see people that spend their whole lives doing it. Like, you can get
also,
lucky and
the
hit.
expenditure, like the R&D they have to put into there, like they have to get personally in debt to the tune of often hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then hope one day to recover not only that, but then some equity growth. And you're so reliant on, I need to produce as many of these and sell as many of these. It's very transactional, as opposed to just facilitating. Again, if this model, if any of these triage models get done correctly, you have very little hands-on and very little actual exposure. For example, renting and then re-renting it.
Yeah,
you can just walk out of your lease almost at any time, and you don't own the unit. You don't have debt on the unit. The leased cars, you terminate your lease at any time. You do not owe $40,000, $70,000.
Sell the vehicle,
or sell the vehicle if you own it. But honestly, in this model, like you probably don't even need to
do short-term leases and everything. It's
yeah,
exactly. I'm 100% on that. The other thing is you do have to take, like, on all of this, no matter what you do, your fear of failure has to be low. Whether you're approaching somebody, looking for mentorship, like prepare yourself that a bunch of them are going to brush you off or have nothing to offer you.
Yeah.
And you're also going to get rejected by a ton of people, and potentially you might try and do the rental business, but these might not work in your market. Right? Like in a Canadian market, this might be a little more difficult, the trailer rental, because the winters are not a super ideal time to be doing it.
And our rules and regulations for stuff.
And rules and regulations are high and this and that. But you got to have that mindset, I think. And don't be afraid to start too small. Like I will say, my first couple businesses, I was marking up cans of paint for $3 to $4 per can of paint.
Yeah, I remember that.
Like that's where it started. And I was selling 10 of those a week, 20 of those a week, making an extra $100 a week or $200 a week, which seems like nothing. But when I was like 18, an extra few $1,000s in my pocket at the end of a year or a month made all the difference, and it changed my mindset and allowed me to kind of get out there and do more.
And the difference would now be probably that you used to have to purchase the cans and then physically resell them one by one.
Yep.
Whereas today, what you'd probably do is set up a landing page website that effectively orders were automatically filled from the supplier and shipped directly to the person, and you never had to touch it.
Exactly.
And you never had to actually buy the paint. Because in theory, you could have made a big investment, bought 1,000 cans of paint, and if the market turned and you couldn't sell them, you were sitting on a lot of paint.
And it happened.
Right? Like, so this model, the refined version, is you never even own the paint.
Exactly.
Right? It just flows through. So now that's cool to hear your perspective. And I do think even though they're so different, there's a lot in common there. And it's thinking that it took me, I mean, even to this day, I'm still trying to pay for projects out of pocket instead of leveraging the bank money, right? Like, so we're all learning, we're all in this together, we're all trying to
when
better
we started,
ourselves.
Chandler's just like, I pay for it all cash. I'm like, holy cash bags. But no, exactly. It's always changing, and I'm constantly learning new things all the time. And I think that's the mindset you need to go into it. You're not going to know everything. There's a ton of risk, and it's trial by fire is a big part of it.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
Let us know if you made your first $1 million. I would love to know how you made your first $1 million.
Yeah.
Or if you have an idea or you're starting something now, let us know. And honestly, I've said this to a few people, but if you're out there starting something like this or doing one of these things, we would love to have you come on and tell your story.
Ooh, totally.
Talk about what you're going through, and
Yeah.
you can plug your business.
Yeah,
So, and we can say, like, people that have come on will say, like, they will get a bunch of outreach for people needing whatever they've come on to talk about. So it could be a benefit to both parties. But
Yeah, hit us up. Let us know what your hustle is.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thanks for listening, guys.
Check out the Patreon.
Never stop selling.
Thanks so much for watching the episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, press like. Don't forget to subscribe. But also check us out on Instagram and TikTok. You can find all the links below. Thanks again for checking us out.